1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. My name is Charlie Pfeiffer, and I will be giving the informative speech for public speaking through Barton County Community College. When giving the task of presenting an informative speech, it is my job to simply just give you information. It is not my job whatsoever to persuade you one way or another with the topic that I'm about to give you tonight. And my topic does have a little bit of controversy depending on where you stand. However, it's just my job to give you the facts on what I know. My topic is over biodiesel. And as you may know, biodiesel has plenty of controversy towards the fact that whether or not we should be putting our tax dollars and our manpower towards making biodiesel. But however, before you start to think one way or another, it's important for you to know the facts. Biodiesel, by definition, is a renewable energy source that is made from vegetable oil or animal fat. It's either one of those two. The reason that biodiesel is important is that one day crude oil eventually will be no more. Regular diesel that is used in truckers and engines, all kinds of things like that, is made from crude oil, and eventually that resource will deplenish. So biodiesel is a great way for us to help replenish our energy source and help us to find a new way to kind of cut down on the emissions that diesel creates. As some of you may know, the difference between diesel and biodiesel is the fact that diesel by itself burns so much nitrous oxides, or what we would call greenhouse gases, and emits it into the atmosphere, while biodiesel burns a less amount of that. So that is why we have put our money and our manpower into making biodiesel. My first visual aid is just a very simple, kind of dumbed down diagram of how biodiesel is made. As I mentioned before, biodiesel can be made from either animal fat or vegetable oil, which would be this component right here. And then in order for it to react in a certain way that we want it to, you have to mix it with an alcohol. Now, in most cases, we would use methanol, and you have to know what you're talking about and have to have some chemistry background. But it's important to know that these are the two main components that go into the reactor. The catalyst in this point is something that helps the reaction go faster, and really doesn't need to be explained much more. When these two things react, they are put into a separator to be separated into two different things: the methyl esters group and the glycerol group. This glycerol group isn't very important to some degree. It's just a byproduct that in the end can be sold somewhere else and be generated with more revenue. Taking this methyl ester, the other byproduct of this process, you take away to methanol removal. And as you take away the methanol from this methyl ester, you can take it and actually put it back towards the forward, and it becomes a recyclable compound. And after you take the methyl out of it, you are left with just the ester. And as you put it through a dryer, you are finished with your biodiesel. That's just a very dumbed down version, thank you, of what this is. And it's just for you to get a general idea of kind of what goes on and the products that are put into it and what you get out of it. Now, it's very important for you to realize that biodiesel is not the same thing as vegetable oil. Some people joke around that you could just take this jug and pour it into your car with a certain type of engine and it would go. That is completely 100% false. In no way, circumstance, or form can you create an engine that would run purely off of canola oil or vegetable oil or old fried oil of any sort. It's very important for you to know that when you take that oil, you have to mix it with another product like an alcohol or methanol in order for it to become biodiesel. Biodiesel is not always used by itself. In other words, you wouldn't just take biodiesel and just put it straight into an engine. Pure 100% biodiesel is what we refer to as B100, which is 100% biodiesel. Biodiesel in the industry today is used in smaller concentrations that is put together with diesel itself. So when you go to a gas station or a diesel station and you were to fill up with what you would want to call biodiesel, you would fill up with what we would call B20, which is 20% biodiesel and 80% diesel. So in this form, you wouldn't really just fill up with biodiesel. You're filling up with a certain compound, which is a mixture of biodiesel and diesel itself. With that said, B20, 20% biodiesel and 80% diesel, can run through almost any diesel engine today. However, this diesel engine, if you were to put B20 inside of it, has to be made after 1992. That is one of the research conclusions they have gotten to, that any engine made before 1992 had certain gaskets and hoses that would be eaten away by the biodiesel. So as long as you're running an engine that is made after 1992, you can run B20 biodiesel through it. It takes a special kind of engine to run B100, and there's several that are implemented around our country today. One of them is at the University of UC Riverside, which is in California. They have a B100 generator that powers their entire campus and is a great example of how biodiesel can work efficiently and is one of the flagship operations for biodiesel today. Another big question you might ask is, where can you get biodiesel? And on this map, you can see that there are many different locations throughout the entire United States where you can fuel up with biodiesel. In Kansas alone, there's over 20, and within the whole United States, there's over 250. The next thing that you need to know about biodiesel is the government and biodiesel. As we know, the government plays a huge role in what we are impacted on and what they do with us. So there are several different organizations through the government that help impact biodiesel. A large part of biodiesel is regulated by the EPA. As you know, the EPA studies and looks over the emissions of fuels and many other things. But specifically for our case, they're going to tell us how useful it is to run biodiesel mixture instead of just a regular diesel. And in that case, that is why we use biodiesel, because they have told us and they have done the studies that have shown that the EPA has approved biodiesel to emit less greenhouse gases, which is what we're looking for. The next program through the government is called the RFS program. The RFS doesn't really stand for much, but what it means is that they try and do their best to promote ethanol. It is their job to make sure that a certain amount of ethanol is produced from now until 2022. In order for biodiesel to be useful, it's important to know that it has to be implemented on a large scale. If you were just a standalone person running one engine and you decided that you wanted to go from regular diesel to biodiesel and you wanted to help save the environment that way, you would have little to no effect whatsoever. In order for biodiesel to work, it has to be implemented on a large scale with millions of trucks, millions of gallons, millions of miles, in order for it to actually leave a less of a footprint on the environment. The last organization is VEETC, which is the Volumetric Ethanol Excise Tax Credit. They make sure that enough tax dollars are put towards making biodiesel and making it so that there are jobs available that way can be implemented on an industrial size, with over 112,000 jobs throughout the country. Lastly, it's your job to decide whether or not you think biodiesel has an impact on our society today. Eventually, like I said earlier, crude oil will be non-existent and we will no longer be able to make diesel as a petroleum product. So eventually we will have to go over to something else, like a renewable energy, like biodiesel, in order to power our cars, trains, and automobiles. Thank you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.